must be considered an irresponsible criminal and villain with contempt for human beings. We have 100% proof and absolute certainty, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that the correlations and causes of the disease are based on the data about which I have just informed you. It is also worth mentioning that BSE pathogens cannot be destroyed simply by cooking the meat and other items or by producing meat meal. They could only be destroyed by high temperatures, as high as 700 C 1228F, and possibly even up to 1000 C 1768F, for previously mutated pathogens that have existed for some time now. The incubation period for the disease also varies and must be determined by the life form's resistance to it. This may vary from 3 months to 40 years, even 50. The higher the evolution of the life form, the longer the incubation period. Therefore, with human beings it can range from 40 to 50 years. Billy says, "Could you possibly tell me the number of human beings on Earth who are already sick with this disease?" Ptaah says, "We were unable to determine this. For this reason, we must rely on estimates regarding some tens of thousands of infected people. Many of them will never become victims of the epidemic, for they will die before they reach this point." Billy says, "So they can consider themselves very lucky." Billy says, "Okay, forget the question. I have another one about overpopulation. Isn't it conceivable that life itself is beginning to fight back because of the rising and spreading overpopulation, and that life will increasingly generate more epidemics and diseases to combat the escalating overpopulation? Isn't it true that the excessive proliferation by human beings makes their bodies and organs, as well as their entire immune system, increasingly more vulnerable, feeble and deficient? The same even holds true for man's consciousness. It follows then that allergies must grow in variety and frequency, with world pollution also playing a major role. Human beings are ever more lackadaisical and feeble in their responsibility, which extends all the way to total irresponsibility. This manifests itself also in the fact that criminals of all types are judged more falsely humane and are given more lenient punishment. They are often even allowed to go free. The thinking about and the search for the meaning of life is increasingly influenced by sectarian and religious idiots, abetting the expansion of sectarian fanaticism and total alienation to the world around us, etc., etc. Must this not result in nature and life ultimately raising a counterattack, that is, through epidemics and catastrophes of the elements, so that human beings are eradicated by the hundreds, possibly even billions? I still can remember that Quetzal and Semyaza also spoke of something similar that once took place on other planets in former times. Ptaah says, "That is correct. When humans on a planet proliferate excessively, nature and life autonomously interfere, which leads to the forced curbing of surplus life forms. Such a curbing and elimination of excess life forms, in this case human beings, ensues first and foremost through epidemics. However, the same thing also happens because life forms, human beings once again, become frail, if not to say incapable of living, due to their bodies, organs and immune system becoming then too weak. Furthermore, nature and life also retaliate against excesses in human beings through catastrophes by way of the elements of nature, and other things." Billy says, "But for the time being this madness the earthlings have incited will continue. If I only think of television, radio and the press that actually foster all ills by glorifying brutality and similar things through movies, books, the theater and the like. I would like to even include news reports and other sensationalistic broadcasts. The more the press, television and radio report on atrocities such as bloodshed and murder, assassinations, mass murders, torture, sectarian degeneration, wars, revolutions, rapes, drug addiction, alcoholism, addiction to legal drugs, capital crime, racism and xenophobia, extremism, neo-Nazism, the Ku Klux Klan, capital punishment, etc., etc., the more copycats will appear." They will model their own actions after these reports and events. Television, radio, newspaper reports, etc., which portray such degenerate events and acts, have the same effect as when somebody pours or dumps gasoline or explosives into a fire. The fire either bursts into gigantic flames or a monumental explosion ensues. The press, television and radio reports are produced solely for the sake of sensationalism. They should be prohibited, freedom of the press or not. In all cases, such sensational reports are only a license to use force, crime, contempt and many similar exploits against humanity. This also holds true for the so-called anti-war films and the endless repetitions of movies, books on non-fiction reports on the grisly events of World War II. These movies and books actually achieve the exact opposite response as that which they propagate. Instead of pondering and creating more peace, such films, books and similar items make human beings more aggressive through all of this continuous nonsense. They merely escalate the ills even further, and with them the lust for rebellious behavior, the lust and intentions for killing, bloodshed and murder, torture, abuse, unmerciful force, crime, hatred, slave trade, slavery, prostitution, abuse and murder of children, contempt for humanity, greed, envy, rape, sexual degeneration, evolution, destruction of life, extermination, pain and sorrow, as well as all other atrocious ills, just as it was depicted in the movies or books, newspapers and periodicals, and in the manner it was described on radio, in movies or in the theater. All of this is even further escalated through movies on violence and horror, to which many people become addicted. Their intelligence is not adequate enough to recognize that the rubbish and incredible danger of human brutalization and imbecility of the consciousness are the basis for all of this violence. It is endured, indeed, oftentimes even sanctioned, by those people of responsible positions in all governments, because they are too blind, stupid, uneducated and illogical, if not to say moronic. For this reason they do not see and recognize the truth and resulting effects they bring about. Also, they foster all agony, pain and sorrow by diverting subsidies from tax monies for artists in the film, book and art industry, who frequently glorify brutality and every human excess, ranging all the way to total contempt for humanity and destruction of life through their dubious and atrocious, nonsensical productions, which are always under the guise that their works are supposedly directed against destruction, degeneration and annihilation. Ptaah says, "I can only say that, without a doubt, your words present the full truth and the reality of the situation." Billy says, "Thanks again. What do you think of this? Because of overpopulation, which is rampant on Earth now, there also exists rampant cruelty to animals that is especially caused by animal factories, animal transports and animal slaughters. In these factories the animals are brutally force-fed and kept under conditions that defy description. Just as with the transportation of animals, they suffer unbelievable torment, injuries and a horrible death, and their psyche is completely destroyed. Some people actually reject the idea that animals possess a psyche, although the opposite is the case. Even in the slaughtering process, animals must suffer the pains of hell. This occurs daily to countless millions of animals such as pigs, chickens, geese, rabbits, various types of cattle, horses, donkeys, sheep, goats, turkeys and camels, indeed, even to crocodiles, turtles, birds, ostriches, kangaroos, fish and crustaceans, etc., etc. The steadily escalating human overpopulation continues to increase the need for animal meat products that will continue to escalate ad infinitum. The oceans will be depleted of fish and one species after another will become extinct. Arable land will be increasingly destroyed, therefore, and forests cut down and razed as well. The environment and nature will be destroyed while the Earth's resources will be totally exploited. Faunal life will be abused, mistreated, tortured and annihilated. This is an unequaled, monstrous condition. One could weep thinking about what will happen. And all this is the result of the criminal increase in Earthlings' procreation and the fostering of their terrestrial population to the point where suffering, misery and excesses of every type generate screaming contempt against humanity and life. Ptaah says, "Of course, your every word is correct and, naturally, I agree with your opinions, for they are based on actual facts." Billy says, "Isn't it true also that the closer people live together in villages and cities, the more susceptible to diseases they become because of overpopulation? Isn't it true that they have increasingly less resistance to disease and that, at the same time, they become more and more insensitive and uncaring toward each other, their total surroundings, life and nature?" Ptaah says, "This is also true." Billy says, "Naturally, it couldn't be any other way. What do you think of this, or what is behind it in America, where else there is a young woman running around who claims to be Venusian, a woman from planet Venus, where people live under domes?" Ptaah says, "We are well aware of this person with the name Omnekwawek, as she calls herself. Her claims are utter nonsense, of course, and merely fraudulent, if not to say hallucinatory, schemes." Billy says, "Exactly, that is what the lady calls herself, Omnekwawek. She is a crazy woman who lies and cheats and defrauds her gullible, foolish followers every chance she gets." Ptaah says, "Indeed." Billy says, "One more time, I have something regarding overpopulation. It is just a statement that must be finally mentioned aloud. Through the continuous growth of mankind's population, increasingly more arable land worldwide is built upon. This means that more and more open country disappears and is destroyed and, inevitably, along with it the roaming grounds of wild animals." Ptaah says, "Precisely." Billy says, "Tell me something, my friend. Is it possible that a radio wristwatch can generate disorders? I have such a wristwatch, as you know, and I wore it continuously up until 2 months ago. Once I started wearing this timepiece, I regularly had such strong pains in the back of my hand that I could no longer even write. 2 months ago these pains even radiated up my entire lower and upper arm, into the shoulder and the throat right behind the right ear, where it caused headaches as well. Although I faithfully applied and massaged medications against rheumatism, the pains remained and even got worse from day to day. Then, as I began pondering the cause for these pains, which obviously were due to an inflammation, it suddenly hit me that perhaps my radio wristwatch was the cause of it all because of the radio waves. What do you make of this?" Ptaah says, "I am certain that your thoughts led you to the correct conclusion. All the devices dependent upon radio waves which are worn near or on the body are extremely harmful to a person's health. Under certain circumstances they can even be destructive to the body or its organs, indeed dangerous to the person's life. Even a radio wristwatch is sufficient to cause this harm, as you yourself have experienced. Such timepieces, or telephones and cordless radio systems, are not advisable. In fact, they are very dangerous if not secure and screened to the point where the radio waves cannot harm the human body. Radio waves are electromagnetic waves, or rather electromagnetic oscillations, that are dangerous to all life should they strike it at too high a rate. This danger applies not only to radio waves, but also to high-tension wires, electric generators and transformers. The physical harm caused by such waves, or rather oscillations that manifest themselves with man and animal, can be of a purely physical or conscious nature. Anything, from eczemas and allergies to cancer, destruction of the psyche and total imbecility, is possible. Furthermore, all species of plants, insects and microorganisms right down to microbes and others are affected by disease and destruction if they are subjected to the aforementioned conditions. Some degree of damage is sustained in every case, although it may not always be immediately recognized. The genuine cause of such health damage, as a rule, is not recognized and, therefore, is attributed to other, unrelated causes. However, prior to any damage becoming apparent, and due to these dangerous electromagnetic influences, a person's magnetic sense of orientation is upset and possibly even destroyed soon after. Existed for some time now. The incubation period for the disease also varies and must be determined by the life form's resistance to it. This may vary from 3 months to 40 years, even 50. The higher the evolution of the life form, the longer the incubation period. Therefore, pathogens cannot be destroyed simply by cooking the meat and other items or by producing meat meal. They could only be destroyed by high temperatures, as high as 700 C1228F, and possibly even up to 1000 C1768F, for previously mutated pathogens that have been some tens of thousands of infected people. Many of them will never become victims of the epidemic, for they will die before they reach this point. Billy says. So they can consider themselves very lucky. Billy says. Okay, forget the question. I have an for, with human beings it can range from 40 to 50 years. Billy says. Could you possibly tell me the number of human beings on Earth who are already sick with this disease? Ptaah says. We were unable to determine this. For this reason, we must rely on estimates. Regardless, must be considered an irresponsible criminal and villain with contempt for human beings. We have 100% proof and absolute certainty, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that the correlations and causes of the disease are based on the data about which I have just informed you. It is also worth mentioning that BSE